All right, let's check in with Marco.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Whiteboard Finance. In today's video, I want to talk about how the Fed has been cutting rates since essentially September 2024, but mortgage rates keep going up. Why is this and what is causing this phenomenon? Let's get right into it. So the title of this video is going to be Why Are Mortgage Rates Up? The rates are cutting, but we have higher rates, with a little confused emoji there, a curious emoji. So let's get right into it. So the Federal Reserve began cutting the federal funds rate in September of 2024 after a series of hikes in 2022 and 2023. This was used to combat inflation. However, interest rates on mortgages have actually risen in the time since then. So what gives? You can see here that we basically had a 50 basis point cut in September of 2024. Basis points, for those of you that don't know, it's basically just a fancy way of saying 1/100th of a percent. So 50 basis points would be 0.5%. So November 6th, 25 basis points, and December 17th, 25 basis points to get us to a target rate of about 4.25 to 4.5%. If you guys don't know what the Fed funds rate is, this is basically the rate at which other banks can lend to each other. It's basically the Federal Reserve setting that base interest rate. So mortgage rates, here's the kicker, you guys. Mortgage rates don't follow the Fed funds rate, okay? So when people say like, hey, the Fed cut rates, now my interest in my savings account is now lower, that's not how mortgage rates work. So mortgage rates, they actually are determined more so by the bond market, specifically the 10-year Treasury bonds. So bond yields, and pretty much by extension mortgage rates, which is what we're talking about here, they're moved by a series of factors, and they're tied to greater economic conditions. This is determined by fiscal policy, usually the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, and we'll be talking about those policies here later in this video. So mortgage rates are determined by adding a spread to the 10-year Treasury yield, which is historically around 1.5 to 2 percentage points, and this is to compensate investors for the higher risk of mortgages. So if the bond yield is 4, mortgage rates are probably going to be around 5.5 to 6. So if we look at this chart, you can see in green, that's the 30-year mortgage rate going back to 2020. The 10-year Treasury yield is the blue line. That's typically what affects mortgage rates. And then the red is the Fed funds rate. Okay, so this is what people are talking about when the Fed is cutting rates or hiking rates. It's this red line. So you can see here from 2020 to basically 2022, we had ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. It didn't really do much for mortgage rates. Mortgage rates were still around 3%, 2.5% or so. Now, if you look at the 10-year, it's much more in tune with what the 30-year mortgage rates are. So the reason for this slide is just to show you, hey, the Fed is cutting rates, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a cheaper mortgage or cheaper paper for a mortgage. So the 10-year Treasury yield is still high. So why? This is a headline from CNBC. This was published on January 10th. Why is this happening? So December's non-farm payrolls, it showed much stronger than expected job growth, which is it's counterintuitive, right? The job growth is strong, but then stocks are tanking at the time of this recording, mortgage rates are higher, et cetera, et cetera. So basically between the strong labor market data, it makes it less likely that the Fed is going to lower interest rate at its upcoming meeting later this month at the time of this recording. So Fed funds futures data is currently priced at less than 3% odds of a rate cut at the next meeting. And following my previous research analyst, Joe Consorti, he showed that they're actually only predicting one rate cut for 2025 total, and we're going to get into that. So let's get to the next slide. So if you look at this tweet from James Lavish, he said, "Good morning. The benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is up over 1% at the same time that the Fed has lowered the Fed funds rate by 1%. So why? That's because numerous reports of strong economic data, which we're going to talk about here, the market now expects a resurgence of inflation. Okay, the bond vigilantes are back." So if you look at this chart, you can see the white line is the 10-year, and then the blue line is the Fed funds rate, and there's almost like a divergence. It's pretty interesting. The blue line is kind of hard to see, but if you look at the laser pointer, it's basically going down like this if you follow the red dot. So there's 4 reasons. Economic strength, so higher yields need to entice investors away from stocks, okay? So think about it. If I'm being compensated to invest in stocks, I need to have a higher return than what I can get with almost a risk-free rate. In theory, investing in treasuries is a quote-unquote risk-free rate. You learn that when you get your finance degree, or if you just research this stuff yourself. But basically, I need to be compensated as an investor. So if I can get a certain amount, let's say if we go back to this chart, 4.73% in a 10-year, that's my hurdle rate. I need to be compensated above and beyond that in the stock market, okay? So higher yields need to entice investors away from stocks. So the Federal Reserve monetary policy, there's a dual mandate of maximum employment and stable prices, okay? So remember, the Fed's job, okay, is to maximize employment, so keep unemployment down, and then also keep inflation targeted at about 2%, okay? So number 3 is inflation. So basically the resurgence of inflation demands higher yields from a 10-year. Again, you need to be compensated for investing your money somewhere. That's why these rates are going up. Then number 4, government spending and debt. So if government debt is high, then the interest rates to compensate investors for that risk need to be high. Remember, when we're investing, we're simply just being compensated for the amount of risk that we're taking on, okay? So if I'm investing in my buddy's brand new startup company that he's starting in the basement of his house, and I'm an early investor, I need to be compensated highly for that because there's a high risk of ruin. There's a high risk of his business not being successful. If I'm investing in a savings account, right, where it's essentially risk-free unless the bank goes under, but even then you should be compensated by FDIC insurance. You should expect a lower rate for that lower level of risk. Make sense? Okay, so now that you're watching this video, you're probably wondering, how could mortgage rates go down? Okay, so mortgage rates have stayed high due to recent economic data releases showing stubborn price growth and low unemployment, which we just showed you. So number 1, we have inflation and employment slow down. Number 2 is a weaker economy, okay? So if the economy is weaker, typically the Fed will cut rates to stimulate the economy. Remember, the Fed funds rate is just like an inverse lever, or think of it just like a lever, right? When rates are high, cost of money is high, cost of doing business is high, research and development, loans, cost of capital, all that stuff is high. When rates are low, money is cheap to borrow, which incentivizes research and development, spending, risk-taking, going further out on that risk curve because money is cheaper not only to borrow but also to pay back, okay? And then number 3 is how could mortgage rates go down? Mortgage treasury spread narrows. So remember, we talked about this historically being 1.5% to 2%. In recent years, we're actually at about 2.5% to 3%, okay, which you can see here in this chart. So that's going to be pretty much how mortgage rates go down in the future. Here's a quick plug of Whiteboard Finance University. It's my community. Check it out if you haven't. It's great. Ton of value for a very low cost. So let's get into my thoughts. So the reason I made this video is to just make potential homeowners aware that are kind of sitting on the fence like, hey, the Fed is cutting rates, but am I really going to see lower mortgage rates? At the time of this recording, no. We can see that in all the charts that I just showed you. So if you're someone on the fence of potentially wanting to buy a house or purchase a condo, home, townhome, whatever, I don't know if it's the best time to do so, but here's the thing. If inflation is higher, inflation typically goes into assets, right? Stocks, real estate, pretty much anything that's connected to the financial system. So if you look at certain homes from, I don't even want to say 2013. 2013 was the best time to buy. You had low rates and ridiculously low prices because of 2007, 2008. But if you were to compare a house for sale in 2013, these houses have doubled and tripled in price since then, just in the last 12 years or so, or 11 and a half years since 07, 08. Are we going to see a huge 07, 08 crash again? I don't think so, because the loan to value on a lot of these homes is ridiculously lower. I think it's at about, the average is at about 45%. During the great financial crisis, it was about like 80, 85% loan to value. So the loan to value of the home is much lower. So if the house is, let's just say for easy numbers, $100,000, we're seeing average amount owed at about $45,000 instead of $80,000, $85,000 during the great financial crisis. So it's tough because money isn't cheap right now. If you want to look at the historical context, you can easily say, oh, but Marco, mortgage rates have always been 7, 8, 9, 10, 12%, right? In the 90s, they were 16% or whatever. But if you look at what you're earning in like a savings account or in these 10-year treasuries, or if you want to make the argument, look at the median household wages, the amount of median household annual salary it takes to buy a home, we're at the highest levels ever, okay? And that's not debatable. It's just fact. So I get it. If you're a potential home buyer, it kind of sucks right now. You're between a rock and a hard place because you have the cost of money, very expensive. Mortgage rates are higher, relatively speaking, to wages, and also where you can get it risk-free elsewhere. So I don't know. A lot of people are making the argument for renting over buying. I understand all that, but that's a whole topic for a whole nother conversation, and we can go into the pros and cons of renting versus buying. Maybe I'll make that another video here soon. So hopefully you got value out of this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video with friends who are looking at potentially buying a house or looking at mortgage rates right now. And as always, have a prosperous day. Okay, so this is insane. So historically, the average cost of a house in the U.S. has been around 5 times the yearly household income. However, during the housing bubble of 2006, this ratio exceeded 7. And then if you look at this, we're at 7.25 right now as of September 2024. Yeah, this is crazy. Let's look at 10 years. Yeah, so in 2016, home price to median household income 5.4. 2024, September, 7.23. Yeah, and also when people argue, this gets on my nerves. Sorry for this rant. These are usually supposed to be funny. People argue, oh, houses are bigger now. You have more house than ever before. No, you dummy. Look at the price per square foot. That's all you need to do. Look at the price per square foot 20 years ago. Look at the price per square foot now. That's all you have to do. Price per square foot. Doesn't matter if you have a pool, a bathroom, a basement, or whatever. All things being equal, price per square foot, housing has become ridiculous because it's tied to the financial system. Look at the M2 money supply chart. Peace.
And let's see what Andre has to say.
So last Friday, something absolutely insane happened. It was midnight, I was awake, and I saw a new meme coin drop, Trump coin. And I was like, here we go again. This is so wrong. Another scam, and I went back to sleep. Biggest mistake ever, because that coin went from $0 to over several billion dollars in just a couple hours. I woke up the next morning like, now, full disclosure, I don't actually own any Trump coin myself, but imagine waking up to realize that the new president of the United States just made a meme coin, and then imagine realizing it's not actually a joke, it really happened, and that someone bought $1 million worth of this coin at 18 cents a piece, which became worth several $100 million. Barron is a genius. No, we have no idea who the buyer actually is. Could be Vivek, could be Elon, could be a small loan of $1 million. But allegedly, it's an insider because no one would have actually bought $1 million worth of a meme coin just minutes after it launched, unless they knew something about something. And while I was working on this video, another meme coin just launched, Melania coin, which means at this point we'll also probably get Barron coin, Eric coin, Junior coin, Ivanka coin, Frederick coin, the whole family tree coin. So today, I want to look at one of the craziest things that's happening, Trump coin. And before I explain how it works, just please know that this is not a real investment. It's a meme, which means I'm all in. If you visit the official website, gettrumpmemes.com, you'll find a disclosure which reads, Trump memes are intended to function as an expression of support for and engagement with the ideals and beliefs embodied by the symbol Trump and the associated artwork, and are not intended to be or to be the subject of an investment opportunity, investment contract, or security of any type. Take that, Gary Gensler. Can you imagine being Mr. Gensler on his last day of office, having your entire career for decades fighting against meme coins only to realize the president just launched his own? So let me explain exactly how this coin works and how this might potentially affect the Bitcoin strategic reserve. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the memes. So the Trump coin is a token on the Solana blockchain. That means Trump coin benefits from Solana's speed, low fees, and it uses the same security. Now, it's separate from Solana itself as the cryptocurrency, but because Solana was chosen as the native blockchain to support it, is also why Solana saw a huge price pump once this was announced. This is how a lot of these meme coins work. They're not creating their own new blockchain entirely with its own security protocols. Instead, they just build on top of existing ones, which are usually Solana or Ethereum, which, as an Ethereum bag holder, makes me sad. Now, obviously, Mr. Trump did not create the token himself. That'd be kind of crazy. Imagine he's just coding it himself like, how stupid. Instead, it was actually developed by the same team that launched his NFTs back in December 2022. So let's take a look at something called tokenomics, which is a fancy word for token and economics to explain how the coin actually works. Now, the total supply of Trump coin is capped at 1 billion tokens, meaning there will only ever be 1 billion. And as of right now, only 20% of that, or 200 million coins, were created when the project launched, with the rest scheduled to release over the next couple of years. And the idea behind this staggered release is to hopefully avoid an oversupply and to create price stability. But whether it actually does or not, we'll see. But another important aspect of tokenomics is what's called distribution. In other words, who were the first people to get these coins and how many of them did they get? And this is where it gets really interesting. So this is the chart breakdown directly from the official website. It shows that 36% of the coins were allocated to creators and CIC Digital, and that's the company who launched this. That is the biggest chunk of it, which goes to them. 18% of the coins is going to creators and CIC Digital Group 2, which doesn't specify how it's different from Group 1, but I imagine this was a secondary team who helped develop this project. And another 18% of the coins is going to go to creators and CIC Digital Group 3. Again, this could be anyone. It could be for marketing teams, advertising, or it could even be YouTubers. If it was, I was not one of them. Another 10% is set aside for what's called liquidity, which is to make sure there's enough volume to buy and sell the coins. 10% is for public distribution, and these are tokens available for people to buy, so I imagine more liquidity. And then 4%, 2%, and 2% are additional allocations to other creator groups, maybe friends or family. So that's the percentage breakdown. But all of these coins don't get unlocked right away. So the second chart on this website shows the release schedule, which is going to happen over the course of the next 36 months or 3 years. For example, liquidity and public distribution, which is about 20% of the total supply, is immediately unlocked. That's where the 200 million coins at launch came from. Now, the biggest portion, which is 36% or 360 million tokens, is owned by Group 1, creators and CIC Digital. These tokens are locked for the first 3 months to prevent an immediate sell-off, but after 3 months, 10% or 36 million tokens unlock instantly. And the rest of the 324 million tokens will be released gradually over the next 24 months at a rate of 450,000 tokens per day. Now, other major groups like Group 2 and Group 3, which each hold 180 million tokens, have a 6-month and a 12-month lockup period respectively, after which point they start to unlock daily over 24 months. So that's how it works. That was pretty complicated, so now let me just try to make sense of all of this and tie it all together and explain it like I'm 5. After the first 3 months, the first major unlock will happen, and every single day the market will be flooded with 450,000 new coins from Group 1. And as the coin ages, it will get more and more centralized in ownership if the coin is not immediately sold off. Because, assuming that no one sells off their newly unlocked coins, at the end of the 3-year period, over 80% of its supply should be controlled by the president, his friends, affiliates, and the company that helped the president launch this. So just keep that in mind. And what I can take away from this is that this token is a lot more fun to bet on right now because of its limited supply, which is 200 million tokens. But at least one analyst says that Mr. Trump and team have sold off roughly $500 million worth of these tokens at launch. And if you're reading stories of someone turning a couple $100 into $1 million, it doesn't necessarily mean they will get the entire value out of that because they still need to sell it. And if someone has millions of dollars in this token, that's a lot of selling pressure, which would drive the price down. Now, personally, I will not be investing, or more accurately, gambling in and providing liquidity for insiders, but that doesn't mean people can't make a lot of money on it or that the price will necessarily go down after the first 3 months. In fact, there's a strong possibility that the creators will announce utility for token holders in the future. Like maybe the ability to have lunch at Mar-a-Lago with the president if you have a certain amount of tokens, or maybe the ability to stake your coins and earn some kind of interest or in-person events. And maybe that'll keep the ball rolling, but just know that after March 17th, things get a lot more risky as insiders start to accumulate a lot of coins at the rate of at least 450,000 coins per day. So that's the tokenomics of how this works, but the thing that I'm most personally interested in though is what does this launch mean for the strategic Bitcoin reserve? Now, the concept of a strategic Bitcoin reserve is about the US government buying and holding a significant amount of Bitcoin as a national asset, exactly how it holds gold in its reserves. Now, the purpose of doing this would be to leverage Bitcoin's price growth to stabilize and potentially strengthen the US dollar. And this idea, believe it or not, has a lot of legislative and political support. For example, in July 2024, Senator Cynthia Lummis introduced the Bitcoin Act, and that's where it was proposed that a strategic Bitcoin reserve is in the best interest of the US. And the plan includes buying up to 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years' time with a cap of 200,000 Bitcoin per year. Now, the funding to do this would come from reevaluating the Federal Reserve's gold assets and reallocating the existing funds that the US holds while avoiding adding to our debt. And President Donald Trump said he supports this idea, and there is a chance that he will create this strategic Bitcoin reserve through what's called an executive order, which avoids the need for approval from Congress. So the theory is that if the president has launched his own meme coin, surely he's going to put Bitcoin on the national reserves. Maybe. That's the theory. But if it does happen, the potential effect on Bitcoin's price would be absolutely insane. Because if the US government starts to buy Bitcoin at that rate, it would spark a global race for other countries to start putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets as well. And some analysts are saying that national adoption at that scale could send Bitcoin's price to multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some estimates saying it's possible to reach $1 million per Bitcoin as early as 2025. Now, it's unlikely, but it is possible. The optimist in me thinks that this strategic reserve is going to happen. It's inevitable. There's just too many big players playing this game now. And the next 4 years are about to be some of the most transformative wealth-creating years of my lifetime. Famous last words. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you buying Trump coin? And what do you think of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Today on Forbes, billionaire Trump pal Phil Ruffin is ready to sell the aging Circus Circus casino. On a Wednesday in December, Phil Ruffin, the 89-year-old casino billionaire, is sitting right where he plans to cash in his chips, in his office at Treasure Island, the strip casino hotel he bought from MGM for $775 million in 2009, or about $1.1 billion today. Right now, however, he's focused on his other property in Vegas, the legendary Circus Circus, which sits on 102 acres on the north end of the strip, close to the Sphere and the new Fontainebleau. Ruffin says he has been approached by buyers to sell Circus Circus. Coyly, he says, quote, "Let's just say there is interest. It's worth $5 billion. Ruffin, who Forbes estimates is worth a conservative $4.7 billion, although he says he is closer to $8 billion, bought Circus Circus for $825 million from MGM in 2019, roughly $1 billion today. Originally built in 1968 by Jay Sarno, a Vegas Hall of Famer who opened Caesar's Palace 2 years earlier, the property featured live circus acts, trained elephants and monkeys on the gaming floor, and was billed as Sin City's first family-friendly casino. Today, the monkeys and elephants are long gone, and the casino has seen better days. But its budget reputation, indoor theme park, live circus performers, and cheap room rates still attract its bread-and-butter demographic, middle-class gamblers with kids. Ruffin says, quote, "We do well. We sell $2 beer, $2 hot dogs, $2 popcorn. People love it. A guy can eat and drink for $6.
Heck yeah.
But Ruffin did not buy Circus Circus only to cater to the low rollers of Las Vegas. He bought it for its potential upside, he says, glancing at his $100,000 Patek Philippe watch. He says, quote, "Why do you think I bought Circus Circus? For the 102 acres. That's the land play. Remember what I did at the frontier? How the value of the land went crazier? Here, it's going crazier."
Yep.
In 1998, Ruffin bought the frontier for $165 million, around $320 million today, which was plagued by a labor strike until Ruffin settled it. 9 years later, he sold the frontier for $1.2 billion, 7 times what he paid for it. While Nevada as a whole is on a winning streak, breaking gaming revenue records in each of the last 4 years, businesses on the northern end of the Strip are struggling. The Sphere, sports mogul James Dolan's new $2.3 billion venue near the north end of Las Vegas Boulevard, is attracting thousands of fans to sold-out shows, but lost $480 million last year. Resorts World Las Vegas, which opened in 2021, recently reported its worst quarter in 2 years with revenues down 23%. The Fontainebleau, partly owned by Koch Real Estate Investments, is reportedly struggling to find its financial footing. But there are positive developments in Sin City. The Oakland A's are moving to a new stadium on the site of the recently demolished Tropicana Casino. And Ruffin has some valuable land for sale. He boasts, quote, "It's the best piece of land on the West Coast. It's got the highway, it's got the Sahara, it's got 2,000 feet on the Strip, and it's the last Strip property. And 102 acres is just a massive amount of land. You can almost build a city on it."
That is nuts.
Though Ruffin is prone to exaggeration, he has a proven track record and is well respected in Las Vegas. And Ruffin is not only one of the last independent casino moguls, he is also best buddies and business partners with the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Not bad.
The two co-own the Trump International Hotel in Vegas. Trump and Ruffin have been friends for decades. Trump was Ruffin's best man, and they've spent the last 12 New Year's Eves together at Mar-a-Lago. This year, Ruffin said he sat at the same table as billionaire and mega GOP donor Miriam Adelson, who co-founded the Las Vegas Sands casino empire with her husband Sheldon, who died in 2021. Also in attendance, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, who donated more than $200 million to the Trump campaign and has become a key advisor to the president. For full coverage, check out Will Yakowitz's piece on Forbes.com.
Thank you, Forbes.
This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, I hope you guys had a good Christmas and New Year break. 2025, hey? I'm feeling positive about this year. I feel like it's going to be a good year. The economy's going to prosper. Chatter about financial crises is going to really die down this year.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned Congress on Friday the U.S. will hit its debt limit within the next few weeks.
In a letter sent to Congress yesterday, she says the Treasury will have to take extraordinary measures to pay Washington's bills on time.
All right. I guess not, because the debt ceiling is back, and once again, Congress needs to find a solution fast to ensure the US doesn't default on its debts. And the most annoying thing about this is they did this to themselves. Congress voted to suspend the debt ceiling until January 1st, 2025. What a lovely New Year's gift for your future self. Nothing like a bit of financial stress to start the new year right. And you think I'm layering it on? You think that's hyperbole? Well, think again, because just last week with the reinstatement of the debt ceiling, Janet Yellen wrote in a letter that, quote, Treasury currently expects to reach the new limit between January 14th and January 23rd, at which time it will be necessary for Treasury to start taking extraordinary measures to stop the United States defaulting on its loans. And I guess that's the end of my holiday. So for those that don't know about the debt ceiling in the United States, it's kind of a quirky rule that isn't particularly common elsewhere around the world, that just occasionally lets politicians play a really dangerous game of political chicken, where the thing at stake is the global economy as we know it today. So to break things down, the United States government has income and expenses. They raise money through taxes, whether that be income taxes, corporate taxes, tariffs, really whatever they can think of. And then they have a big long list of expenses as well. Social Security, Medicare, defense, health, interest, the list goes on. Now, fiscal year to date, so since October 2024, the government has brought in $630-ish billion of revenue. The problem is they've spent $1.25 trillion. Now, that's not the best. And what it means every time this scenario happens where there's more spending than there is income is the US government has to borrow money to make up the shortfall. It's like us trying to buy a house. We don't have $1 million just to spend on a house. So we have to borrow some money from the bank to spend that extra money that we don't have. Now, the only difference is that in this situation, the government doesn't just turn to a bank to borrow its money. It gets it from investors like you, me, big money managers, and even other countries. Countries like Japan, China, the UK, Luxembourg, the Cayman Islands, Canada, France, Belgium, Switzerland, Taiwan, Singapore, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Australia, and the list goes on. You can see the point, right? With the US dollar being the reserve currency of the world, pretty much every country holds US debt, and it's really important that the US government continues to pay back its debts. So Congress puts a limit on the total amount the government can borrow to pay its bills, and when they want to raise the limit, they all come together and chat about it and have to approve a new limit. And in principle, that sounds like a decent idea, right? It forces lawmakers to periodically assess the country's borrowing and spending habits, acting as a check on government overreach. It draws public attention to the national debt levels, meaning greater awareness of fiscal issues among citizens and policymakers. And most notably, it protects against catastrophic hyperinflation or a global financial crisis, because the government can't just borrow insane amounts of money and financially cripple the country. So there are genuine arguments for the use of a debt ceiling, but these days, it also causes some really bad problems. The main problem being that raising the debt ceiling has now become a political bargaining tool. For example, you guys probably remember 18 months ago when the debt ceiling was making the news. The Senate was blue, but the House of Representatives was red. Biden was hoping for a clean rise in the debt ceiling, but the House Republicans passed a bill that paired a debt ceiling increase with spending cuts, essentially using the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip. Now, what ended up happening in this situation is that the negotiations between the Republicans and the Democrats went on and on and on, and an agreement was only reached at the 11th hour.
After weeks of negotiations, the president says the two sides have reached a compromise. The breakthrough coming just days before June 5th, the date Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned the U.S. could run out of cash to pay all of its bills on time. The showdown over the debt ceiling has been looming over the U.S. economy.
They pushed it until there was literally days left until the U.S. was going to start defaulting on some of its loans. And regardless of which political party you support, normalizing this is very dangerous because of the potential fallout should the US default on any of its debts.
Because it prevents, in his words, what could have been a catastrophic default and would have led to an economic recession, retirement accounts devastated, and millions of jobs lost.
And that brings us to what's going on today, because the solution that Congress came up with, in a stroke of pure brilliance, was to just worry about it later. Yes, their solution was to suspend the debt ceiling until the 1st of January 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. So what exactly is the situation that we're looking at now? Well, when the debt ceiling was suspended in June of 2023, the ceiling was set at $31.4 trillion. But because it was a suspension, now that it gets reinstated at whatever the debt level was at the end of last year. And get this, the US national debt as of December 31st was not $31.4 trillion, rather, it was $36.1 trillion. I kid you not, the United States government managed to grow the debt pile by 15% in the space of 18 months. And this all comes back to the idea we were talking about before. The United States runs a monster deficit. They spend a lot more than they earn. And until that massive gap between spending and income is controlled, the US will have to continue adding to that big old pile of debt. But of course, with the debt ceiling in place, that complicates things. Now, I will just clarify, the debt ceiling relates to the amount of money the US government can borrow to pay its bills. It doesn't authorize new spending. It just allows the government to meet obligations already approved by Congress. But the point stands that with the US government running a monster deficit, they will most certainly need to raise the debt ceiling just to borrow enough to meet their obligations. So all this is to say, you're probably going to see a lot more chatter about the debt ceiling this year, and it sounds like action will be needed very shortly to ensure the US can continue to pay its debts. And despite the Republicans' clean sweep in the recent US election, it still seems that this isn't a done deal. For example, Fitch has come out recently saying that it is skeptical that a debt limit suspension or increase will be implemented quickly, stating the US faces significant fiscal policy challenges in 2025. We believe it is unlikely that these will be resolved expeditiously because of long-standing weaknesses in the federal government's budgetary process and a narrow Republican House majority. And that's a really interesting point to discuss because Donald Trump has come out recently and said he's actually in favor of completely abolishing the debt ceiling. In a phone interview with NBC News, Trump said getting rid of the debt ceiling entirely would be, quote, the smartest thing Congress could do, and that, quote, he would support that entirely. But his position contrasts with the hardline fiscal conservatives in his own party, who are reluctant to approve increases without significant spending reforms. Ultimately, what this means is that with only a narrow Republican majority in the House, it makes it difficult to unify the party around a single strategy. And that is probably why we're going to see a lot more squabbling this year. And I really don't like to see this at all. One of the words that is used extensively when talking about the debt ceiling is brinkmanship. And I think that's a really worrying thing. Brinkmanship is, quote, the practice of pursuing a dangerous policy to the limits of safety before stopping. But really, we know it simply as chicken. It's a game of chicken that gets played between the two parties to push each other to their absolute limits. But in the case of the debt ceiling debate, the consequence of not raising it could be very severe. Even temporary delays in debt repayment erode confidence in US fiscal policy. And if Congress fails to act, the US could genuinely default on its debt, which would most likely trigger a big financial crisis. There are really 6 main consequences of pushing the debt ceiling debate too far. One is that the US credit rating would take a hit, meaning investors would likely demand higher yields on treasury bonds to compensate for this perceived risk, which would mean higher cost of servicing government debt, which creates that snowball effect on the federal budget. Another likely problem would be a weakening in the US dollar, so a default would definitely undermine confidence in the dollar as the world's reserve currency, most likely prompting central banks and investors to reduce their holdings of dollar-denominated assets. This would also have a flow-on effect to global trade. As we know, most international contracts and financial transactions are conducted in US dollars, so a default would destabilize the dollar's value, and companies reliant on dollar-denominated trade could face losses. Also, banks and financial institutions holding US treasuries as collateral could face margin calls or liquidity crises due to the reduced value of their assets. This could lead to a credit crunch, limiting access to loans for businesses or individuals. If bond yields spike, you would also imagine equity prices would tank, disrupting portfolios around the world. And then you actually get to the real world consequences, the boots on the ground consequences. If the US Treasury ran out of cash to pay its obligations, it would unfortunately mean that Social Security benefits, military salaries, and interest payments to everyday people holding Treasury bonds would be delayed. This would mean millions of Americans currently reliant on federal payments would face financial hardship. Consumer spending would likely drop, and this could even lead to a slowing of the economy and thus job losses for everyday people. Any way you spin it, the idea of not raising the debt ceiling because of political jousting is just a bad idea. But there are also some who believe that this political brinkmanship around the debt ceiling doesn't actually matter, and they'll bring up the case of 2011. In mid-2011, Congress and the Obama administration were locked in a political impasse over raising the debt ceiling, and on August 2nd, 2011, just hours before the Treasury would have exhausted its borrowing authority, Congress passed the Budget Control Act of 2011, getting the debt ceiling raised. At the time, Standard & Poor's downgraded the credit rating of the United States from AAA to AA+, which marked the first time in history that the US lost its top credit rating. Now, people thought this was going to cause a lot of turmoil, but it kind of didn't. The Dow Jones did fall 635 points, or 5.6%, on August 8th, 2011, the first trading day after the downgrade. But contrary to expectations, yields on US Treasuries actually fell. Now, at the time, there were broader economic risks, such as the European sovereign debt crisis playing out. But even considering this, it still showed that investors went back to US Treasuries for safety, and US Treasuries remained one of the most liquid and trusted assets globally. Even recently, Donald Trump has come out saying the debt ceiling is a meaningless concept and that no one knows for sure what would happen if it were someday to be breached. He said, quote, "It doesn't mean anything except psychologically," saying that a breach could be a, quote, "catastrophe" or meaningless. So overall, it is a hotly debated topic. Some people think that we need the debt ceiling to ensure the government can't go crazy. Others just see the frustration of the political brinkmanship and just want to get rid of it altogether, as most other countries don't even have a debt ceiling and they seem to work out fine. But with that said, definitely let me know your opinion down in the comment section below. Should the US keep the debt ceiling? Should they suspend it again? Or should they abolish it altogether, like Donald Trump suggests?
President Trump is back in office and he's already shaking up markets because he signed a record 26 executive orders just on day one. Some of the changes that he made include declaring a national energy emergency so we can drill more oil, mandating that all federal employees can no longer work from home, that you have to work in the office, and canceling the EV subsidies. But the real cherry on top here has to do with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, because their official government website is now live. And the only thing on the website was a picture of the Doge meme coin dog. That obviously helped the Doge meme coin jump up by around 10% at one point yesterday. But the stock market didn't do too bad either because the Dow Jones was up by more than 500 points. Now, what I want you to do is understand what's happening, understand some of the changes that might be coming. That way you can make better decisions with your money as an investor. So let's jump right in. More specifically, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about tariffs, I want to talk about energy, and I want to talk about the end of remote work. And just so you know, all the executive orders and actions that are referenced in this video are linked for you down in the description if you want to read them further. Starting with tariffs, President Trump passed a presidential action titled America First Trade Policy, which essentially did two things. Number one is he is now threatening tariffs on other countries, especially Mexico and Canada. What he's saying is that if Mexico and Canada do not get their drug problems and illegal immigration problems into the United States under control, that Trump is going to pass a 25% tariff on these countries starting February 1. In addition to that, Trump also created the External Revenue Service, ERS. We all know what the IRS is. That's the person, the entity that collects your taxes. Here's what it says about the ERS. Quote, "We are implementing an External Revenue Service, ERS, to collect tariffs, duties, and other foreign trade-related revenues." So if the tariffs are passed, it's going to be the External Revenue Service that's going to make sure that they get paid. Now, tariffs are an interesting point because we all know that Trump was really campaigning hard on tariffs. When he was campaigning, he said that he would impose a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada and potentially a 60% tariff on goods from China. But interestingly, we didn't really see any solid tariffs on China. Instead, what we saw is that the tariffs on China are more of a negotiating point to get TikTok into the United States. We all know what's been going on with TikTok, where TikTok got banned for a little bit, then it got reinstated. Well, this is where Trump is using the tariffs as a negotiating point to bring TikTok to the United States. Here's what Trump said from himself, quote, "If we wanted to make a deal with TikTok and it would be a good deal, then I think ultimately China would approve, because if not, we would put tariffs on China." He goes on to say that if no deal is reached, meaning if no TikTok deal is reached with the United States, then that's a certain hostility, and we will put tariffs of 25, 30, 50, or even 100% on China. So if China does not give TikTok to the United States, you can expect more tariffs coming on China. So you can start to see the bargaining power that he's using the tariffs for. Now, we've been covering all of this in Market Briefs. Market Briefs is my free financial newsletter where every day my team is breaking down what's happening in things like the economy, the stock market, the housing market, the crypto market, and the global economy to a fun, witty, and easy to read email. We have hundreds of thousands of investors that are reading Market Briefs every morning. So if you want to join Market Briefs, all you got to do for free is click the link down in the description below. Now, moving on to what he said about number two, energy, because Trump passed an order called Unleashing American Energy. And here's what he said directly from the order, because this is a national emergency. Quote, high energy costs devastate American consumers by driving up the cost of transportation, heating, utilities, farming, and manufacturing, while weakening our national security. It is thus in the national interest to unleash America's affordable and reliable energy and natural resources. This will restore American prosperity. So what he's saying is we have high energy costs here in the United States. These high energy costs are making it expensive for people to afford their lives. It makes groceries more expensive because transportation and manufacturing is more expensive. And because of that, it creates a national security issue because it's weakening our economy. And thus, we need to baby drill, essentially use more of our natural resources to extract energy like oil. It goes on to say this, that this order is to encourage energy exploration and production on federal lands and waters, meaning drilling oil on federal land and federal water in the United States. But the other part of this, which is also very interesting, is Section E, which says that this order wants to eliminate the electric vehicle EV mandate and promote true consumer choice, which is essential for economic growth and innovation. Let me explain what that means, because in 2021, when President Joe Biden entered office, he passed an executive order which said that by the year 2030, all new cars sold in America, or 50% of all new cars sold in America, should be electric vehicles. This is what Trump is essentially saying, well, not anymore. That has been canceled. So we'll see where that goes. Some Tesla shareholders were obviously not happy because Tesla is an electric vehicle company. So we'll see where we go with electric vehicles, which brings me to number 3, remote work. And again, this is specifically for federal employees. And President Trump passed a mandate titled Return to In-Person Work. And here's what it said.
There's a difference.
Heads of all departments and agencies in the executive branch of government shall, as soon as practicable, take all necessary steps to terminate remote work arrangements and require employees to return to work in person at the respective duty stations on a full-time basis. Again, this is for federal employees, the whole idea being that maybe this is a way to weed some people out, that people are getting salaries from the government who might not actually be working or kind of doing it as a part-time job. And if you don't want to actually do the job, then this is an easy way to weed you out, because now you got to come back into the office. We've seen a lot of companies do the same thing, that as they want to push for more productivity, they want to weed out the fat. They say, come back into the office. And the people that don't actually want to do the work, or they don't want to work for the company, or they don't want to make that commute, well, they can see themselves out and you don't have to pay them a severance. Now, what does all this mean? Well, all of these executive orders create changes. And what you want to do as an investor is understand how these things can create an opportunity for you. But it depends on your strategy. Because if you are an investor that is just passively investing your money into the economy, you don't got to worry about any of this. You don't got to worry about who's in the White House. You don't got to worry about what the executive orders are. You don't got to worry about what's happening in the stock market today. What you keep doing is ABB. Always be buying. So if you're just investing your money into the United States economy, maybe you're investing your money into the S&P 500, into the total stock market, into the Dow Jones. None of this stuff matters. Don't get caught up into the noise, because you're going to see things go up, you're going to see things go down, you're going to see people panic, you're going to see people get emotional, because anytime you see a new president, it creates new emotion. Some people like the president, some people hate the president. So you bet that there's going to be emotion. You bet that there's going to be headlines, and you bet that that's going to drive markets up and down. But if you're just passively investing your money, none of this matters. Ignore the noise, just keep investing, stick with your strategy. Now, for those of you that understand the risk of being a little bit more involved with your investments, that understand the risk of looking for more niche opportunities, this can also create opportunities. And that's what you want to pay attention to. Because the reality is, the largest spender in our economy is the government. And what you want to do as a smart investor is look for where the money is moving, not where the money has been. And so now, if our economy is about $29 trillion large, that's what it was in 2024. It's probably going to be a little bit larger in 2025. The largest spender in our economy is the United States government, which means trillions of dollars of spending are allocated or determined by the United States government. Well, Trump is going to change where some of that spending happens. For example, we could see more investments into oil. We could see more investments into space. We could see more investments into policing, borders, immigration policies. We could see more policies and money move into these areas. All these things can create an investment opportunity. Now, there's a lot of different companies that have made multiple videos talking about this that are involved in here. But I want you to also understand that just because there's a shift, just because money is moving into one area, let's talk about oil, because we all know that a lot of oil companies are going to see the ability to potentially drill more oil. That could mean more opportunity, more ability to make more money. Does that mean that every oil company is going to boom? No, because some oil companies might not be able to take advantage of some of the things that are going on. Some of the oil companies might be very badly managed. They might be very bad with their cash. They might run their companies into the ground. Certain oil companies might not get the same subsidies or grants from the government as others. This is where your own research and analysis has to come in. I want you to understand how investors think by understanding what's happening. And when you understand what's happening, you can start looking for opportunities. But then you also have to do your own digging to understand what's going on and what it is that you're investing in. Because anytime you start to invest into more of these niche opportunities, you start to take on more risk. Of course, you can see more upside. That's the whole reason. More risk, more potential return. But you have to understand that you want to be still putting in your work. For example, let's talk about remote work ending for a second. Okay. If we start to see thousands of more employees go into the office in DC, what does that mean? Well, a lot of those offices are probably going to be government owned. So it probably won't affect the real estate values too much. Now, unless these are employees going into privately owned buildings, that could increase the value of those privately owned buildings. But you also want to think a little bit bigger now. There's a lot of private toll roads around the Metro DC area. If more people are commuting into the city, that could benefit those toll roads.
How many people?
The restaurants and other local businesses around there, they could potentially see more foot traffic. That could help those businesses. It could have other related businesses if people have to go into the office, and that's the way you want to think as an investor. As these changes are coming, because we're going to see changes, we're going to see more changes every day. As these changes are happening, you want to think about where the opportunity is and how they can create an investment opportunity for you. Because again, as an investor, what you want to do is understand where the money is going. That way you can put some of your money there and hopefully get some of the upside. But that requires you to, number one, know your strategy. Do you want to just passively invest your money into the markets, or do you want to find more niche opportunities? If you want to find more niche opportunities, now you have to study these market shifts. As you study these market shifts, then you want to dig a little bit deeper after you find a good shift. Once you find a good shift, that's when you want to start studying the individual companies. You want to start studying the individual investments, do the analysis, and then you want to take action. But just understand the risk. Investing has risks. You are never guaranteed to make money when you invest. In fact, you will lose money at some point, which is why you want to always do your own due diligence and never blindly trust a random guy on YouTube. My goal is to help you understand what's happening. That way you can make better decisions with your money, because there's a lot of headlines out there, a lot of emotion out there. You're going to see a lot of movement in the markets up and down because Trump has been campaigning hard on the economy and markets. So you bet that there's going to be a lot of people on Wall Street watching every move that Trump does, which ultimately just creates more emotion. But I want you to be a financially savvy investor, not get caught up in the emotion, and be able to find the opportunity. That's what every financially savvy investor does.
Cool,
and that means, number one, you got to be able to separate the emotion from logic. Then you got to understand how to use your money so you have money to invest. Then you have to find the right opportunity for you depending on your goals. And with that, I hope you get a better understanding of what's going on in the markets right now. And I will see you on YouTube tomorrow.